Hello and welcome to Gefet and the Daf. I'm Yael Shimoni, bringing to you learning of Gemara, Rashi, Tosfot, and other Rishonim, and you're learning of Bikiyut Daf Yomi. And today we're going to talk about the shattered tablets in the Ark. We just had Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, and as you know, in Yud Tammuz, the first luchot, the tablets, were shattered. And here our sugya deals with the question, where exactly were these shattered pieces? And the Rishonim have an interesting machloket about where they were positioned exactly inside the ark. I don't know how much you've given thought to how the ark looked and what exactly was around it and what was inside and what was outside. And I think during the sugya, it's also poetic and it gives a lot of thoughts about things that are shattered and how do you fix them and how do you deal with the shattered parts of your life and of your Torah. So B'ezrat Hashem, this will be our Gefet in this sugya. Let's begin and see the context first. So we're in a parak that talks about divisions. And when do we divide stuff? And the Mishnah said at the end of it, a few pages before, זה הכלל, כל שיחלק ושם עליו חולקים, ואם לאו אין חולקים. If you have something that if you divide it, it will be destroyed. You don't divide it up unless, says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, בזמן שאין שניהם רוצים, אבל בזמן ששניהם רוצים, אפילו פחות מכך יחלוקו. If you have two sides that are interested in breaking something into half, even though it's going to be destroyed, that's fine. The Mishnah continues and says that is true, except for one exception. וכתבי הקודש, אף על פי ששניהם רוצים, לא יחלוקו. If you're talking about כתבי הקודש, if you're talking about Torah, even if the two sides want to divide a Sefer Torah, it's not allowed. You do not divide a Sefer Torah. So that's the context and division of a Sefer Torah and how Sefer Torah are built and their Chumashim were built. That's the background to our sugya. What's interesting to us is the Gemara in Bava Batra Yudal Amud Aleph that brings the machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about the Sefer Torah that was inside or outside the ark. As we will see, and I'll sum it up from the outside because it's a bit of a long Gemara and you've been learning it in the Pshat. The machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is how exactly the ark is built, what's inside the ark and what's outside the ark, and where do we learn each part of this. So first, the Baraita brings us the Shita of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says that there's a pasuk, En ba'aron rak shne luchot ha'avanim asher haniach sham Moshe. The pasuk has two miutim, two words that are there to diminish, to say that something is less. En ba'aron, en is the first word, rak is the second word. These are two words that are making something smaller. Says Rabbi Meir, we have a rule that if something is making smaller twice, mi'ut achar mi'ut, and mi'ut achar mi'ut ela rabot. If the Torah says that there's less and less, it actually means there is more. So instead of understanding that inside the ark there was only the second tablets, luchot ha'avanim asher haniach sham Moshe, we learned that there was something extra in there. What was there? Says Rabbi Meir, that's a Sefer Torah that was written, that Moshe wrote, and that was also inside Aron haBerit. Okay, that's the shita of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, there's not enough room in the ark because he calculates the room of the ark differently, and therefore the Sefer Torah has no room inside the ark. The Sefer Torah was outside of the ark. What was also inside the ark? Amudim, pillars. Okay, this is new. What are these pillars? I didn't even know that there were pillars inside the ark. Here we see Rashi and Tosfot that explain to us what the pillars are. Rashi says pillars, bet amudim, כמין, בית עמודי כסף, כמין עמודי ספר תורה שוכבים לאורכו והלוחות ביניהם. According to Rashi, what Rabbi Yehuda says is that the ark was big, but not as big as the ark of Rabbi Meir. That's the machloket. Since it was smaller, there was no room for a Sefer Torah. In the middle, you had the tablets, and on each side of the tablets, you had another pillar that was made out of silver. And these pillars looked like atzei chaim of a Sefer Torah. And they were there. It's as if the tablets are like a Sefer Torah with two pillars on the sides. That's according to Rashi. Tosfot says that according to Rabbeinu Tam, these pillars were not pillars of a Sefer Torah, but they had a symbolic meaning. Let's see the Tosfot. נראה לרבנו תם, וסימן להעמדת ישראל היה. These pillars are a symbol of the standing of Israel. And that's why, says Rabbeinu Tam, they were not made out of gold, because that's reminding you of the Egel. That's why they were made out of silver. Okay, so what did we see up till now? According to Rabbi Meir, there was a Sefer Torah inside the ark because there was enough room there. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there was no Sefer Torah. There were pillars of silver inside the ark. Continues the Braita and says, okay, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, he thinks that there was no Sefer Torah, okay. So how does he read the pasuk that said that there was something extra inside the ark? According to the Braita, these pillars cannot be this extra thing. It sounds as if the pillars are part of the architecture of the ark, and therefore that's not a good enough answer for Rabbi Yehuda. So what's the extra bit inside the ark? Says the Braita, ומה אני מקיים אין בארון רק, לרבות שברי לוחות שמונחים בארון. Okay, so let's sum up what we saw up till now. According to Rabbi Meir, inside the ark, you have the second tablets and the Sefer Torah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have the second tablets and the pieces of the shattered first tablets. Is that the machoket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda? That according to Rabbi Meir, the shattered pieces are not inside the ark? If we continue in the Gemara, we see that that is not the case. Because the Gemara says that it's obviously true that Rabbi Meir has to agree that the pieces of the first luchot, the pieces of the shattered luchot, have to be inside the ark. Why does the Gemara assume that? It's very obvious to the Gemara that nobody will be cholik on that. So where exactly are the shivrei luchot according to Rabbi Meir, and how does Rabbi Meir prove that? He used the pasuk to explain that what's inside the ark is a Sefer Torah, so he needs a new pasuk to explain that there are pieces of the first tablets inside the ark. Says the Gemara, אלא שברי לוחות המונחים בארון מנעלי, נפקא ליה מדתני רבי יוסף. דתני רבי יוסף אשר שיברת ושמתם, מלמד שלוחות ושברי לוחות מונחים בארון. Says the Gemara, we have a new pasuk, a different pasuk. Asher shibarta v'samtam. That's the pasuk that Rabbi Meir uses in order to explain how does he learn that the shattered pieces of the tablets were inside the ark. So what did we see up till now? Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda both agree that there are shattered pieces of the ark inside the ark. The first luchot and the second luchot are both in there. They only have different psukim to prove it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there is a pasuk that says that Sefer Torah is not there, not inside. The Sefer Torah is outside of the covenant. And according to Rabbi Meir, there's another pasuk that says that the Sefer Torah that Moshe wrote was also inside. We also learn that there are amudim, these pillars of silver. And here we also have a machloket whether or not these pillars of silver are inside or outside. According to Rabbi Meir, they're outside, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, they're inside the ark. Another thing that the Gemara added to us, and all this you know in the Pshat, is that according to Rav Huna, there's another pasuk, Asher nikra Shem Hashem Tzvaot Yoshev HaKruvim, and that pasuk implies that inside the ark we also had the names of God. Okay, so we learned new things now, that the ark had an extra bit of it on the outside that either carried the pillars of silver, according to Rabbi Meir, or carried the Sefer Torah, according to Rabbi Yehuda. There is something outside of the ark. Inside the ark, there are the names of God and the tablets, the whole tablets and the shattered tablets, according to all the shittot. The Rishonim had a machloket according to both of them, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. They both said there were shattered pieces of the other tablets inside. Where were they positioned? This whole sugya is talking about a very small space that has to have all of this in it. So if the first tablets were also at the same size of the second tablets, where was there room from them inside the covenant? So let's look at the different perushim here, and let's start with the shita of Rashi. Rashi says a few words, very clear, שברי לוחות שמונחים, says Rashi, תחת הלוחות. According to Rashi, there's no room for extra space inside the ark. So if you want to have 2 tablets in there, the first tablets have to be either below or above. And Rashi says the pieces were below. What does that mean that the pieces are below? We'll look in a moment and think together if this position of the shattered pieces actually says something about the meaning of the shattered pieces. As we will see, Tosfot in Masechet Menachot and elsewhere is cholek on Rashi, or at least gives another option. And Tosfot says, in פרק כמה דבבא בתרא אמרינן הלוחות אורכן 6 ורוחבן 6 ועוביין ג' אם כל אחת בפני עצמה הייתה 6 על 6, אי אפשר להשוון בארון זה אצל זו כ"ד טפחים, וצריך לומר שהיו שברי לוחות תחת השלמות. So first Tosfot goes over what Rashi says and explains that Rashi is right because there's no room for the pieces of the first covenant inside. But then continues Tosfot and says, there's another option. ובירושלמי דשקלים, בפרק י"ג שופרות, הלכה א', מלמד שאורכן 6 ורוחבן 3, ומונחות אורכן לאורכו של ארון, ויכול ליישב 4 זו אצל זאת ברוחבן. Says that Tosfot inside the Yerushalmi, there's a different calculations that the width of the luchot was only 3 amot. And if that's the case, you could have both the first luchot, the shattered ones, next to the second luchot. Continues Tosfot and said, actually, I can read the Gemara that we read now and say that it's saying exactly the same thing. והשעה שלנו, says תוספות נני דקאמר בבבא בתרא, אורכן 6 ורוחבן 6, מצית למימר דמיירא בין שניהם. Says the Tosfot here, the Gemara says that you should know that the tablets were the size of 6 of 6. It doesn't say only the second tablets. Maybe the Gemara means all the tablets together were 6 on 6. And here in our sugya, we can read it differently from Rashi and differently from how he offered in the same in the first part of this Tosfot. Not that the first tablets are shattered below the second tablets, but that they're seated side by side. Does that make a difference if we put the second tablets on top of the first tablets or if we have them placed side by side? So here, something interesting in my limud happened. I had all kinds of ideas, and I opened the Gemara that I have in the Bet Midrash, which is a very special Gemara with a lot of additions. And there, I saw an extra addition in Rabbanit Yael that I didn't have in the Gemara in my house. You should know that different Gemarot sometimes have different additions. And here in Rabbanit Yael in this Gemara, and I took a shot for you so you can see that it's really written there, there's a discussion about the meaning of the machloket between Rashi and Tosfot. Even though Rabbanit Yael was earlier, this is a commentary that I'm not sure if it was earlier to the machloket of Rashi and Tosfot or later. So let's look what's written here. Says Rabbanit Yael, shivrei luchot munachim ba'aron tachat hashlemot. Okay, Rabbanit Yael is like Rashi, and that's in all the Gemarot. He thinks, that's what it seems here, that the first tablets were underneath the second tablets. But then we have brackets, and an addition here in Rabbanit Yael, and again, I don't know if this addition is from his or from a later commentary. ואית דמפרשי הכי, לוחות אורכן 6 ורוחבן 3, ולא היו שברי לוחות מונחים תחת השלמות דעה וביזיון על שברי לוחות. Okay, here this edition says that as we saw, the Tosfot has a different way of reading of the Gemara, that the first luchot were not underneath, that they were side by side. And why? Because, says here, this commentary, that if you put the first luchot underneath the second, that's bizayon. I don't know how much you do this at home, but there are all kinds of rules on how to deal with Sifrei Kodesh and Sifrei Chol. If you have a Tanakh and then you have Harry Potter, and you want to put them one on top of the other, so the Tanakh will be on top of Harry Potter, because if the Tanakh will be underneath, that's disrespectful. So if you put something underneath something else, it means it's less. It's not as respected. So according to this, there's a machloket here between Rashi that says that the first luchot that were shattered are not as respected as the second luchot. But according to Tosfot, that can't be. They have to be side by side. Maybe it's because he thinks that the first shattered tablets did not lose from their importance. And that's why you cannot have them underneath or above the second luchot. They have to be equal. And continues the commentary here, Halishna Batra אמר לן משום רבי קלונימוס איש רומי, זכר צדיק לברכה ולתחייה. והיא אמרת, כיוון תברכו אותיות לאב ובהן קדושה כל כך, ולפיכך היו מנוחות תחת השלמות, הלא מציתן ממנה, דאמרינן בדוכתא אחריתי, הווה זהיר בזקן ששכח תלמודו מחמת אונסו. אלא לוחות שלמות, שברי לוחות מונחות זו בצד זו. What's written here is an explanation to why Rashi might think that the first tablets are less important than the second ones. Why? As you remember, the first tablets were given from God, physically a material from God, from heaven, and they were also written in the writing of God. And when they were broken, according to the Midrash, otiyot parchu ba'avir, the writing disappeared and went up back to heaven. So here, in this commentary, it's explaining that maybe according to Rashi, the fact that there's nothing written on the first tablets, that means that they're less. The writing is more important than the material, according to Rashi. And therefore, the second tablets, even though their material is from earth, since they're written, that's why they are worth more and are more mechubad, more respected than the first shattered ones. Even the shattered material is the material from heaven. That's according to Rashi. But according to how Tosfot explained, no. The fact that there is no writing doesn't mean that they lost their meaning. Even if they lost their writing, still the fact that they were given from heaven puts them on the same level as the second luchot. So here we see a meaning behind the machloket between Rashi and Tosfot, that according to Rashi, the first tablets lost a lot in their breaking, and according to Tosfot, they did not lose so much, and they remain on a level that is exactly the same level as the second tablets which are written. I want to add in another interesting Tosfot that Rabbi Akiva Iger in Gideon HaShas tells us to look in this sugya. Rabbi Akiva Iger sends us to Masechet Eruvin, Daf Samech Gimel. There Tosfot brings the idea of the Ri, which is different than what we saw Rashi and Tosfot up till now. According to the Ri, not only that the luchot were one next to the other, but according to the Ri, actually they were in two different arcs. Let's see what's written here in the Tosfot in Daf Samech Gimel a bit. ואומר לי, בשני ארונות היו, שאחד שבו שברי לוחות מונחים, ואותו היו מוליכים במלחמות, כדתניא בספרי, וארון ברית אדוני נוסע לפניהם יומם, זה שיוצא עמם במחנה, והוא ארון עץ שעשה משה בעלותו לסיני, כדכתיב בלוחות האחרונות במשנה תורה, ועשית לך ארון עץ. ותחילה שם בו גם לוחות האחרונות, כדכתיב ואשים את הלוחות בארון אשר עשיתי, עד שנעשה ארון של זהב שעשה בצלאל, ואז נתנו בו לוחות אחרונות, כדכתיב ונתת אל הארון את העדות אשר אתן אליך. According to Ri, each luchot had their different arc. It's true that there was one part of their mutual lives that they were sitting together in the same arc. What's the story of the two arcs? The covenant was given before Bezalel created the ark that we know, the ark which is of gold. And when Moshe came down with the first luchot and he broke them, he had to keep them somewhere. According to Ri, and this is also according to Sifri and other Midrashim, there was another ark, an ark made out of wood that Moshe built. And that ark is where Moshe took the pieces of the first luchot that he broke and put them there. And then when he went up and got the second ones, he also added them in. But the minute Bezalel created the gold ark, only the whole luchot were moved to that ark, and the broken ones remained in the wooden ark that Moshe built. It seems to me that this idea of the Ri, and we don't have time in the Gefet to look at this idea of these two arcs, and maybe I'm telling you things that you've never heard before. This is indeed something that we should learn more in Iyun and in depth. But when it comes to our Gefet, I think that the Ri is also treading in the same path as the Tosfot, saying that luchot rishonim and luchot shanim cannot really be together one underneath the other. each one of them has their own space because maybe they're different. And you can't say that one is less than the other. Each one of them has to have its own home. So what did we see up till now? According to our Gemara, it says that also the broken tablets were inside the ark. But where? According to Rashi, they were underneath, and it sounds that the Savara here is because they were less than the second luchot that were whole. According to Tosfot, in two different variations, it doesn't sound that way. It sounds that the shattered Torah that we have in our lives is not less than the whole Torah we have in our lives. It's still there, side by side, or maybe living in a different part of us, because we cannot see it as something less than the whole Torah that we have. This is very philosophical and interesting. How do we deal with what was broken? But now I want to show you a commentary not from Rashi and Tosfot, but from the Sfat Emes. This is a commentary in the Sfat Emes that I met, I think, last year, and I found it fascinating. And I want to connect it into our sugya to explain how was there room for both luchot in the same ark if we don't go according to Tosfot, and we're not going according to Rashi because we don't want them to be one on top of the other. We want them to be side by side, but in the same ark. Is that possible? So according to the Sfat Emes, yes. So let's see what the Sfat Emes says. Sfat Emes in Parashat Kitisa asks an interesting question. When God sends Moshe to create the second tablets, he tells Moshe, Psol lecha luchot avanim karishonim. I'm a student of Aron Lichtenstein, and he taught me many times that when there's the word ke or kasher, kaf adimyon, we have to understand what does it mean, karishonim. What does it mean that the second tablets were like the first? In what sense were they like? That's the question here of the Sfat Emes, and he asks, ויש לי תמוה, איך נמצא בעולם הזה כראשונים, שנאמר עליהם מעשה אלוקים המה? Says the Sfat Emes, the first tablets were given from God. How can God tell Moshe, make the second tablets like the first one? Is there a way that material from earth can be like the material from heaven? It's important to state here that other Rishonim understood that like means in the same shape and not in the same material. But here the Sfat Emes is saying the pshat of the pasuk means like the same material. And here the Sfat Emes gives an interesting and new explanation of how the second tablets were built. ויראה לפרש, כי באמת הם הראשונים והם האחרונים. Says the Sfat Emes, you have to understand, the second tablets were built out of the shreds of the shattered first tablets. לכן אמרו לוחות ושברי לוחות מונחים בארון, כי נשאר עוד שברים שצריך לברר עד לעתיד. According to the Sfat Emes, when Moshe came down and he broke the tablets, he put them in the wooden covenant. And then when God told him, now come back with new tablets, what God told Moshe was to go and do a puzzle from the broken bits that he himself shattered. And Moshe actually built the second tablets from the shattered pieces of the first tablets, but he did not complete his mission. And that's why when he came down with the second tablets, there were still pieces that were missing in them that he did not find the right place. And they're still missing till today. And they're waiting to be reconnected. And this way we can understand technically why there's no problem to put both tablets in the same ark, because you have no issue of room. If the width and the size of the arks is 6 on 6, they were broken and then reassembled from the same material, obviously there's room for everything. And you don't have the second tablets on top of the first because there's room for all the pieces of the puzzle in the same box. So here we have a third way to see how was there room for the shattered pieces together with the unshattered pieces, because they're actually the same object, because the second tablets are built out of the first tablets. And if we'll go back to this machloket, we'll see that we have a different explanation now that how do we deal with the shattered pieces of our Torah and of our lives. According to Rashi, the shattered part of our lives is less than the whole part of our lives, and that's why the shattered part is below what is whole. According to Tosfot, it's on the same level and it's side by side. And Re says maybe it's in two different arcs. According to the Sfat Emes, the shattered pieces of our lives is what builds the whole parts of our lives. It's the same. There's no new material. You're rebuilding yourself from the shattered bits of your history. And that's the history of Torah. And maybe the new Torah is just a new way of readjusting and rebuilding the puzzle of what was broken in the past. So, what did we do today? We saw an interesting machloket between Rashi and Tosfot, and I added the Sfat Emes of where exactly are the shattered pieces, and what we claimed through the commentary, the extra commentary of Rabbanit Yael Shimoni, there's a meaning behind where exactly are the shattered pieces of Torah in our lives. So this was, again, a slightly different Gefet, I think. And I hope you can take these thoughts with you to Zayin Tammuz, the shattering, and we can think how we are reassembling or keeping or regarding what was broken in our Torah and in our lives, and to try and rebuild the whole out of the shattered pieces. So have a good month when we have a month of tshuva, geula, and besorot tovot. Take care.